and welcome to the Anything and Everything podcast. I'm Gaz, I'm my partner in crime, co-host.
Glenn, aka Bez.
Today we're going to discuss about one of the most famous prisons in the world, Alcatraz.
Well, Alcatraz is, very famous from back in the day in the films, and it's got so much range of famous in prisons.
It's an iconic island though, isn't it?
It is an iconic island, yeah. But there's been some famous people there, and it dates way back between 10,000 and 20,000 years ago.
So that would have been inhabited by indigenous people then, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It's I found out a bit of information the other day. The first known inhabitants of the island were people of the Miwok and the Ohlone tribes.
Okay. I mean, they must have struggled for food. I wonder what. Oh yeah, look, collecting food. So that would have been birds, eggs, and marine life, fish.
Yeah, and they also used the island. The indigenous people also used the island for banishment or isolation for members of the tribes who did not adhere to the tribal laws' way of life.
So many tribe members fled to the island as well and hid there to avoid forced Christianity being imposed on them.
Yeah, but to be honest, I don't know if the Spanish would have lasted too long on the western coast. To be honest,
You've got to think in that time period. Obviously, it's a massive river, isn't it, or is it sea? I don't know.
it's
San Francisco Bay.
yeah, it's got to be what, the Atlantic, isn't it? Something like that. Is it the Atlantic? It must be.
Yeah. You think trying to cross there on a man-made kayak canoe?
Not with the winds and all that though.
You think how they survived doing that though?
Well,
Anyway,
they could have survived it. Like 3 inmates did, if you remember. 3 inmates did escape.
when it was obviously Alcatraz as a prison.
But the island was also named something else in 1775 by Juan Manuel de Ayala, which was called La Isla de los Alcatrazes, which translate Island of the Pelicans. Quite a cool name, actually, that is.
Yeah.
I like that.
In the 1800s, the military identified the strategic position of the island as a defensive position of the Bay Area.
And the military began constructing the fortress at the top of a sandstone rock, and by 1854 Alcatraz was home to the first operational lighthouse on the west coast of the United States.
So the US Army began holding military prisoners at Alcatraz by the late 1850s. Being an island surrounded by cold, strong currents of the San Francisco Bay waters and away from mainland, Alcatraz was also a perfect place to hold prisoners, as it was assumed that no one attempting to escape would swim and survive the cold waters. And obviously then you had, I think it was tiger sharks, was it tiger sharks, I believe?
Something, but those winds got to be really strong though. Really strong for it to be said that the currents and the winds and all that would stop a prisoner from escaping, which could easily swim. But like I'd said before, we know 3 prisoners actually escaped, and one of them actually sent an FBI a letter stating that he was still alive.
Yeah, I believe he survived till he was 81.
Yeah, something like that. I heard that too. But the citizens were accused of treasons, which included the inmates of Confederate sympathizers, treason, rebellious American Indians who disputed land agreements with the federal government. But during the Spanish-American War in 1898, the early 20th century, the inmate population at the island grew, and the military used the growing inmate labour population to construct the cell houses and other prison amenities by 1912. Alcatraz was the largest reinforced concrete building.
I mean, after 80 years of occupation, the US military relinquished Alcatraz to the US Justice Department, which wanted a federal prison to incarcerate criminal population to dangerous and difficult to house at other US penitentiaries.
Well, that really leads on to the famous inmates, because, you know, where else could you put these inmates we're about to describe and who they were for without them escaping with the people they knew?
And obviously, the most famous inmate that I recall is obviously Al Capone.
Also, Whitey Bulger.
Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah, he was there. Also, one with from what was the one? Public Enemy. What was his name?
Oh, yes.
Was it? Oh, it wasn't L. No. I'll get it in a sec.
Dillinger. Wasn't it Dillinger?
No. Alvin Karpis. He was the last Public Enemy to be taken in the 1930s.
Oh.
So yeah, there's a few famous prisoners that were there, but like you said yourself, the most notorious one of them all was Capone.
Yeah.
But the inmates at the Alcatraz, who came to know the prison system's prison, had 4 basic rights. Can you guess what they are?
Go on. Let's have a think. 4 rights.
Well, prison, you don't get a lot of rights, do you?
No.
But you've got to have your... Food's got to be one of them. Food's got to be one of them.
Obviously shelter, I would have thought.
Yeah.
What about clothing?
TV time? Or did they have TV? Did they have TVs then?
God, that would have been later on, surely, with Al Capone's era.
Yeah, it must have been later on. I'm not sure. But...
I mean, medical didn't really help Al Capone, did it?
No. So that's food, shelter, obviously clothing, and medical assistance.
Yeah.
And anything more than that was earned privilege through the good reformed behaviour. And these earned privileges would include corresponding of meeting with family members, access to prison library, recreational activities such as music, painting and working. Think about it though, back in there working and all that, it's got to be the old like woodwork and sewing, and it's got to be some sort of back in that time.
Yeah, you got the a lot of the prisons were doing car number plates, weren't they? Making number plates.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it. They were making car number plates for the government, the US government.
And if it's during the war time, they would have been making military.
Yeah. But also, Alcatraz housed close to 260 to 275 inmates at a time, although it had a capacity of 336 inmates. Some more well than others, like we've just referenced, but here are the list of the famous inmates that have resided at Alcatraz.
So we've got Al Capone, known as obviously Scarface.
George Kelly, known as Machine Gun Kelly.
Alvin
Kapowicz.
He was also known as Casey Kelly.
Robert Stroud, Birdman.
Roy Gardner.
Henry Young,
James Bulger.
which was Whitey.
Yeah. And then you got Mickey Cohen. That's just a handful of like some of the most famous
Yeah.
that people would obviously know.
But you think about all the inmates that are in there. What crimes they done to be put on the island, to be put on that rock? It must have been some horrendous crimes going on.
Yeah, but Al Capone was tax evasion, wasn't it?
It was tax evasion, but he was a fully mobbed up, wasn't he? He was a mafia boss.
Yeah.
So they're going to want to keep him behind things. But I'm talking about people who's probably obviously killed someone, done fraud. Do you know what I mean? They've done something
Yes.
that's terribly bad to be put on a single island.
When it says during the 29 years that Alcatraz served as a federal penitentiary, 14 attempts were made by 36 inmates to separate escape incidents. Of these 36 inmates, 23 were caught, 6 were shot and killed during their attempts. 2 drowned and 5 inmates are to this day missing and presumed dead.
Yeah, but missing or presumed dead, but we know 3 of them made it
And carried on living their life.
and carried on living their life in, obviously, you know, Brazil or something.
I think, I'm not. I think one of them was actually in the States. I think he lived with his daughter. How true that is, I don't know.
No, but that takes us to the the famous escape from Alcatraz in 1962, which it does include Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers.
Yeah.
So,
Obviously, Alcatraz. You had the films Escape from Alcatraz with Sean Connery. No, with Clint Eastwood. Sorry.
yeah, it was Clint Eastwood. No, yes, it was. It
Yeah.
was. But also there was another film made called The Rock with Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage.
Brilliant.
Fantastic film, that. But yeah, it's Clarence and John Anglin brothers, sorry, from Alcatraz, never to be found either dead or alive again. So I know a little bit that I've read that one of them sent a letter to the FBI stating that he was well and alive, which caused another manhunt for a most wanted.
I think it took 17 years for the FBI to close all their investigations on that case.
Jeez, 1979, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wonder
But there was sightings.
Yeah.
There was sightings, but there was no credible evidence suggesting that the Anglin brothers or Morris were still alive in the US or overseas. The US Marshal Services somehow, however, are investigating Leeds to this day. To this day.
Mm.
So how many years is that?
So
62.
1962. So we're looking at 60 odd years.
About that, yeah. Nearly hitting 60 years, 59 years.
Yeah.
The Marshal Services claim that the investigation will remain ongoing until they have found conclusive proof that their men are deceased or until they turn 99 years of age. So it's a still ongoing manhunt.
I think it's more embarrassment, isn't it? For the
Yeah.
authorities.
Yeah, but getting two men at an age of 99, just what are they going to do in their 80s? You know?
Well, they can't go back to Alcatraz, can they? It's a shame.
It's a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how they can seem to do that. But anyway, Amy claims to the authorities that presume the men drowned, and ongoing Marshal State investigation, the family descendants of Clarence and John Anglin firmly believe that the brothers and Morris made it and are alive. Wow.
That's cool.
So, what? Those winds and waters must have really, you know, hypothermia and...
You think of how today, for the times then of having to make something to get you across San Francisco Bay, them waters, the sharks, the coldness, and it would have been done at night time, so it would have been even colder.
Also, the currents.
Yep.
Having to, you know, fight the current all the time.
All them things
Wow.
you're battling against, and something that they made it.
But they've obviously had the will and the will and the hope to make it.
Yep.
So-
Wouldn't be able to do that kind of stuff now. I'm sorry, but men, adults, children of today's times, they wouldn't do that.
Nah.
Not strong enough.
No. The family have furnished photographs and Christmas cards that they claim the Anglin brothers sent them sporadically. And the nephews and the sister of Clarence and John allegedly believe that the brothers were in touch with them right until the mid-70s.
Wow.
It's unbelievable.
But then you think, if the FBI has got all this information, but they've still not caught the Anglin brothers.
No, but if you take a look at it, that this was years ago.
Yeah.
They don't have the resources they have now. Back then, they don't have all this fancy gear to look for someone and everything like that. It was basically basic stuff. Because wasn't like what's it called? Like photo identification and all that come out then, or IDing and stuff. Not fingerprints, that was been around for years. Like forensics and stuff. It wasn't like we have now.
Yeah, DNA.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to get DNA. And, well, they might have been able to.
Mm.
So, up until the mid-70s, lately, in 2013, San Francisco Police Department received a handwritten letter.
That's what I told you, didn't I?
Yeah, supposedly from John Anglin, proposing a trade that he would return and do time for 1 year and return be allowed to allow cancer treatment. Wow.
So basically, he had cancer. He was dying of cancer and wanted the treatment, but he couldn't go anywhere because he was a wanted man.
Further alleged that Morris had died in 2018 and Clarence...
No, 2008.
Oh, sorry, 2008.
Yeah.
Clarence in 2011. The letter fueled renewed interest in the case, but all further investigation ended inconclusively, and the case is still open.
That's got to be a nightmare for the US government and the FBI and everything. Noting that Alcatraz is one of the most secured prisons back then on the planet, and 3 men got away.
It's got to be an embarrassment, surely. Really?
Yeah.
You do not think that 3 men carried on from 1962, unfortunately passed in 2008 and 2011. That's like, what, 50 odd years? 40 odd years?
And they received the letter in 2013, and what's it now, 2021?
Yeah.
So what's that, 8 years?
8 years.
8 years on from that. But while the fate of the Anglin brothers and Morris will remain the stuff of legends. So, and they continue to one of the crazy conspiracy theories that were actually turned out to be true.
I mean, you've got new scientific evidence now suggests that the trio might have made out alive and lived their lives incognito. They've even done computer model that consider the bay tides, winds, other factors reveal that the inmates stood a small chance of survival if they started paddling their raft between 11 p.m. and midnight, heading north towards Angel Island. So
yeah, but between 11 and that, it's got to be pitch black.
Pitch black and freezing cold.
So how would you know where you're heading? How would you know where you're heading north? How would you know where you're going to land up? That you're not going to get hypothermia?
Eaten by sharks.
Yeah, it's...
You're talking 1962, so it wouldn't have been... San Francisco wouldn't have been lit up as much as what it would be today.
No. During the investigation, though, the remains of the paddle boat and other belongings of the trio were found on Angel Island. So they made it.
Yeah,
Obviously, they made it because they found the belongings. So rumour has it that these inmates did escape the island at night, while authorities continue to maintain that no one ever made it out of Alcatraz alive.
Yeah.
They're embarrassed.
Of course they are. Wouldn't you be?
They're really, really embarrassed. But after being in federal penitentiary for 29 years and having housed 1,576 inmates over the years, Alcatraz closed its doors in 1964. Oh, just 2 years
2 years after.
So they must have been embarrassed due
Yeah.
to high operational costs and deteriorating infrastructure.
I mean, the place was falling apart even then.
Yeah, it wasn't built properly, was it?
No.
They said it was the most reinforced prison, but
You think having all that sea water and sea air and storms bashing that building constantly.
yeah, it'd be all the salt and eroding it, and look at now. You look at islands now, and it's all got salt marks and where it's eroding it away. And
Yeah.
look at the cliffs of Dover. Look at the cliffs of Dover. All the rocks are just falling off now due to the sea air and everything.
Yeah.
But like a group of Indians led by the Mohawk activist Richard Oakes claimed the island on behalf of the Indians of all tribes in 1969 and hoped to establish a university and museum on the island.
However, in 1971, President Nixon removed the Native American occupiers, and in 1972 the island became part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and was open to the public in 1973.
Today, Alcatraz attracts more than 1 million tourists a year.
That's mad.
But we can move on, and we're going to move on to the famous inmates that were at Alcatraz.
Well, we've got to start with the famous one, haven't we?
We got
Mr. Scarface,
Mr. Scarface himself.
Al Capone.
Yeah, he was a character, wasn't he? Very intelligent man.
Very.
Very intelligent man, but yeah, he's in a memoir written by Warden James Johnston. He reminisced about the intensity of the public interest around Capone's imprisonment, stating that he was continually barraged with questions about Big Al. So,
Well, each day newspapers and press flooded his office with phone calls, wanting to know everything from how Capone liked the weather on the rock to what job assignment he was currently holding.
I think he was put there in what, 1932? Was it 1932? Don't quote me on that, but it's that sort of era. I think. It was, yeah, 1934.
Okay.
Yeah, he was put there in, I think, 1934, I think it was. But as you know, Capone started his life as a crime at a young age. Rumoured to have started pimping prostitutes, before reaching puberty, which in my mind is very sick man. Very sick man.
Yeah, but obviously for decades he was racketeering, including prostitution, bootlegging, gambling houses, and he was believed to earn over $100,000 per week.
But he also, for extra money, he was raised in the tough streets of Brooklyn, which we all know, and earned extra money as a bouncer in various brothels. But where he was raised in Brooklyn, this is my question: what made him go to Chicago to be the boss there?
Yeah.
Was it because there was too many, obviously mafia families in New York, and he wanted to move out, broaden his horizon on his own?
Well, the man did. I mean, Capone had mastered the art of politics and was a very, very wealthy man and powerful gangster figure. He attempted to balance his activities. Despite his intelligence, occupation, he had become a highly visible public figure.
Yeah, but I've literally just read up. I'll go back to about him being raised in Brooklyn and going to Chicago. Capone moved to Chicago and was managing a popular nightclub named the Four Deuces. By 1924, he had various, obviously, like you've just said, businesses and was earning a lot of money a week. But the scar on his face was actually due to a pub fight.
Yep.
Some guy slashed him.
Well, before arriving at Alcatraz, Capone had been a master and manipulator of his environment at the federal penitentiary in Atlanta. Despite strict convictions from the courts, Capone was always able to persuade his keepers into into procuring his every whim, and often dictated his own privileges.
Wow.
That's power, isn't it?
That's power. And that, to me, is power which is beyond the government, beyond the FBI, beyond the prison system. Because not all prisoners can do that.
No.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's really thing. And it was said that he had convinced many guards to work for him. And his cell boosted expensive furnishings, which includes personal bedding, along with many other amenities not extended to other inmates serving lesser crimes.
I mean, his cell was carpeted and also had a radio, around which many of the guards would sit without conversing and listening to their favourite radio series.
That just, to me, means like back then the prison systems weren't as hard as people said it was.
No.
Not when you got one person who can control near enough a whole prison whilst being incarcerated.
Yeah.
He's obviously having a holiday, isn't he?
Getting away from the wife?
Basically, yeah. His friends and family maintained residence in a nearby hotel, and each day he was flooded with visitors. Well, he's going to be, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's obviously going to be. But he did master the art of politics.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, he's obviously a very wealthy man. He made daily trips to City Hall, opened soup kitchens to feed the poor, and even lobbied for milk bottles dating to ensure the safety of all the city's children.
We were talking about embarrassment, weren't we?
Yeah.
City officials often were embarrassed by the polite strength of Capone. It says it's itself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And began to leverage his illegal activities through the police raids, along with setting intentional fires to his place of business. Well, what's that? That's insurance jobs.
I mean, they did identify him as a modern day Robin Hood.
But he was I'm not going to swear on his podcast, but he's a right bugger.
Yeah.
He was naughty, very naughty. But it wasn't long, however, before the public started weighing against him, when it was believed that he had ordered the death of a famed local prosecutor, named Billy McSwiggin.
What name? The young prosecutor had before tried to pin Capone with the violent murder of a rival gang member, and he had a reputation for going after bootleggers. Although many speculated against Al's involvement in McSwiggin's death, there was a great outcry against gangster violence, and public sentiment went against Capone.
But it's a bit like Rudy Giuliani in the mafia. He brought them down.
Yeah.
He brought all the big bosses down, and even he had a threat on his life from prosecuting other mafia members.
Yeah, but then wasn't Capone the Valentine murders? Wasn't that?
Yeah, Valentine's Day. Was it Valentine's Day murders?
What do you reckon Capone was worth at his end?
What? Yeah, about by 19. Yeah, there you go. By 1929, as Gaz says, what was Capone's empire worth?
Unbelievable for 1929.
If you want to have a guess on that,
quickly put it in the comments.
But we'll come back to that after we've finished going through him, and we get back to that and tell you how much he was worth in 1929, which is a lot of money for 1929. He was ready to wage a war on his most prominent bootlegging rival, George Bugs Moran.
Wow.
Bugs was also one of the principal Chicago gangsters. So he was trying to make war as well at the same time.
Yeah. He was known by publicly talk against Capone and maintained a sense of spiteful arrogance that was said to anger Capone so much that Moran became one of Al's routine topics of discussion.
Yeah, but I'd be a bit like that if someone started talking to me about me publicly and trying to start a war with me and everything like that. I think I'd be in the same shoes as Al, to be honest.
Yeah. It was rumoured that Capone gave orders to take Bugs down by assassinating his gang members from the bottom, not stopping until they reached Bugs. So Capone was living a lavish in Palm Beach and assigned one of his top associates, Machine Gun, Mr. Gurn, to mastermind the hit.
See? And going on what you said there, the St. Valentine's Day massacre received a lot of national attention. The Capone that was glamorized in books, newspapers across the country. Capone was high class, family oriented, and self-made gangster millionaire. I think we should move on to the next one.
Let's do it.
But the answer to the question of the net worth,
$62 million.
and that is 1929. That's got to be in the billions now, in today's money.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
Why don't we do Al Capone's right hand man, Mr. Machine Gun?
It's not. It was Mr. Machine Gun McGurn.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
completely
no.
different.
So we got one here though. George Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah, you got George Machine Gun Kelly.
It was another inmate.
But I'm also going to. We're going to start the next one with another famous person, which you know,
Yep.
which was an organised crime figure as well. Mr. James Joseph Bolger Jr., aka
Whitey. So, is a former organised crime figure from South Boston, Massachusetts. Local folklore depicted Bolger as a Robin Hood style social bandit dedicated to protecting the neighbourhood and its residents.
Bolger allegedly masterminded a protection racket targeting drug kingpins and those running illegal gambling operations. Based upon testimony of former associates, federal prosecutors have indicted Bolger for 19 murders.
Wow. Well, Bolger developed a reputation as a skilled thief or tailgater and a tough street fighter fiercely loyal to South Boston. This led him to meeting more experienced criminals and more lucrative opportunities. The elder Bolger worked as a union labourer, an occasional longshoreman. However, he lost his arm in an industrial accident and the family was reduced to poverty. Wow.
But yeah, United States Attorney indicates that on May 17th, 1955, Bolger together with Donald Dermondy and Carl Smith participated in the armed robbery of the Industrial National Bank, Darlington branch, Pawtucket, Rhode Island. In participating in this robbery, Bolger carried out a .22 revolver and forced two employees of the bank to lie on the floor during the course of the robbery. The getaway from the robbery was accomplished by the use of a car stolen by three participants just prior to the robbery. The amount stolen was $42,112. So he's a bit of a rascal.
Wasn't he just?
Bit of a rascal.
Do we know when he was put to Alcatraz? When was he put in? Mugshot taken in 1956.
I think that was the USP
Yeah.
Atlanta mugshot. But it's inmates during the initial social interview. Bolger stated that he was introduced to Carl Smith by an ex-convict and later encouraged driver Phil Smith for something we did not know about at a particular time. When he learned about this deal and cornered a bank, concerned a bank robbery, he wanted to back out. He claims he wasn't even more. He was more afraid when he learned that he had to go to the bank since two persons was involved in and backed out.
Right. He stated that the bank robbery was successful, and afterwards he was in on 3 more bank robberies. Eventually, Smith was caught after he robbed a bank with 2 men in Tennessee.
This guy likes banks, doesn't he?
Prison life. So on 21st of June 1956, Bolger was convicted and sentenced to serve 20 years in a federal prison for armed robbery and sent to USP Atlanta. Bolger's inmate case file shows he was subject to extreme testing under the MK Ultra project. This was code name for US government covert research operations, experimenting in behavioural engineering of humans. So basically mind control.
Basically.
CIA scientific intelligence division. Wow.
That's a bit of thing, but I've just read a little bit more. The program itself engaged in many illegal activities. In particular, it used unwitting convicts as its test subjects, which led to controversy regarding its legitimacy. MK Ultra involved the use of many methodologies to manipulate people's mental states and alter brain functions, including surreptitious administration of drugs, especially LSD.
Wow.
And other chemicals, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, as well as various forms of torture.
So basically, they were like a lab rat.
Basically, yeah, like you said, lab rat. They were just test subjects. They weren't actually being treated as prisoners. They were just being treated as some experiment.
Yeah.
You know.
But you think LSD to nowadays is a party festival drug?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's really bad. But on our last famous inmate, just to give you an insight, is George Machine Gun Kelly. I've heard of him before. He sounds a bit of a naughty, famous gangster from the Prohibition era.
You know, they do say he was probably one of the most famous gangsters from the Prohibition era.
Well, didn't he work with Capone in certain states and stuff to be, you know?
Well, I mean, during this time that Kelly met a young woman by the name of Geneva Ramsey, Kelly quickly fell in love with Geneva and made an abrupt decision to quit school and marry.
But back in those days, they did marry young, didn't they?
Yeah.
They were allowed to marry young and stuff like that. And he fathered 2 children with her as well to make ends meet. Took a job as a cab driver in Memphis.
Right.
Elvis.
Uh-huh.
He worked long hours and liked reward for his time. Kelly and Geneva were struggling financially, and as the job was failing to provide enough money to support their family, distressed and broke, Kelly left his job with the cab company to seek other avenues to make ends meet. Yeah.
Quite a tough looking man.
Yes, he doesn't look someone to thing with, to mess with, to be honest. But along with the new success, there also come quandaries of working in the underground. After being arrested on several occasions for illegal trafficking, Kelly decided to leave Memphis along with a new girlfriend and head west.
Wow. Adopted the new alias of George R. Kelly to help preserve the respect and name of his upstanding family back home. Kelly's luck continued to soar too with great monetary scores and several unfortunate predicaments. By 1927, Kelly had already started to earn reputation in the underground world as a seasoned gangster, having wealthed several arrests and serving various jail sentences. And in 1928 he was caught smuggling liquor into an Indian reservoir and was sentenced to 3 years at Leavenworth Penitentiary.
Wow. There's a lot back then, but in Prohibition, there was a lot of smuggling because, you know, the US clamped down on, you know, drink, gambling. They went through a whole crackdown.
Yeah. Obviously the bootlegging was quite a big thing at that time.
Yeah, it was. It was good business. Very good business. But, yeah. After serving out another long sentence at the state penitentiary in New Mexico, in 1929 for another similar conviction, Kelly gravitated to Oklahoma City, where he hooked up with a small-time bootlegger named Steve Anderson. Kelly soon fell for Anderson's attractive mistress, Catherine Thorne, and seasoned criminal in her own right. Thorne had come from a family of outlaws and had been arrested for various charges, ranging from robbery to prostitution. She was divorced twice. Her second husband had been a bootlegger, who had later been found shot under suspicion, shot to death under suspicion circumstances.
Yeah, the official determination of death was suicide, but many people, including one of the investigators, had long suspected that Catherine was involved, since only days before she had made comments to a gas station attendant she was gonna excuse me, kill that goddamn Charlie Thorne.
Wow.
Oh,
You're right there.
sorry about that. Went down the wrong hole.
Drink your Coke Zero.
Yeah, cool.
Many, up to his relationship with Thorne, Kelly had been relatively small-time criminal. But Catherine's influence soon became obvious, as Kelly's crime sprees would launch him to be the prestigious status of public enemy number one. So basically, it was a woman that pushed him to be public enemy number one.
Bloody women.
Yeah, she was also known to take the spent gun cartridge and pass them around to acquaintances at many of the underground drinking clubs, introducing him as souvenirs from her husband, Machine Gun Kelly.
Worse. In July of 1933, Catherine and Kelly plotted a scheme to kidnap wealthy oil tycoon and businessman Charles Urchell. Kelly was carrying his trademark Tommy gun, and two other men carrying pistols entered the Urchell's mansion in Oklahoma City. The Urshells were playing a game of bridge with friends when Kelly stormed in, threatening to blow everyone's head off.
Isn't that a cliche? All these films I've seen and everything, they even us say it and everything. But, wow, he's just
He was up there,
he was,
wasn't he?
yeah,
He was up there with some of the greats. Quite a naughty boy.
yeah. Kelly was transferred to Leavenworth in Kansas. Catherine was transferred to a federal prison in Cincinnati. Kelly was arrogant towards prison officials and bragged to the press that he would escape, break out his wife, and they would spend Christmas together.
Aww. No, it was decided that these threats should be taken seriously, and in August of 1934, Kelly, along with his accomplice Albert Bates and Harvey Bailey, were transferred from Leavenworth by train to Alcatraz, arriving on September 4th, 1934. They would be among the first groups of prisoners. Kelly became prisoner number AZ #117.
Yeah, he's a bit of a naughty boy, but back in those days, like I said before, it wasn't, it, wasn't that the police force used more brutal things towards people, like beating up and shooting. Not like more than it is today. I would
Yeah.
say it's thingy, but the actual Alcatraz is named the Rock due to after the devastating San Francisco earthquake of 1906, inmates from nearby prisons were transferred to the infallible Alcatraz. Over the next 5 years, prisoners built a new jail, designated Pacific Branch U.S. military prison Alcatraz Island, popularly known as the Rock. Alcatraz served as an army disciplinary barracks until 1933. Prisoners were educated and received military and vocational training there.
Wow. Well, Alcatraz of the early 20th century was a minimum security prison. Prisoners spent their days working and learning. Some were even employed as babysitters for the families of prison officers.
Wow.
They eventually built a baseball field, and inmates fashioned their own baseball uniforms, and obviously boxing matches among inmates known as Alcatraz fights.
That's in most prisons though, in
Yeah.
their boxing matches.
So these fights were hosted on Friday nights. Prison life played a role in the changing landscape of the island. The military transported soil to Alcatraz from nearby Angel Island, and many prisoners were trained as gardeners. They planted roses and bluegrass, poppies and lilies. Under the order of the U.S. Army, Alcatraz was a fairly mid-institution, and its accommodation was favourable.
Also, here's a question for you. Did you know it was also called Uncle Sam's Devil's Island?
Yeah.
Alcatraz was obtained by the Federal Bureau of Prisons in 1934. The former military detention centre became America's first maximum security civilian penitentiary, the Prison Systems Prison. So it was basically specifically designed to house the most horrendous prisoners, troublemakers that other federal prisons could not successfully detain in them. The Great Depression also witnessed some most heinous crimes activity in modern America history.
Wow. Obviously, you had the Great Depression witness some of the most heinous criminal activities in modern American history. Wow.
Yeah.
Alcatraz severity was well suited to its time.
Alcatraz was home to notorious criminals, like we've just said, which you guys will know, and hopefully you enjoyed listening to it. And there was loads more people there. Like I said, over 1,500 inmates. So, but yeah, it closed due to the prison. The prison on Alcatraz Islands was just too expensive to operate.
Yeah.
So all the supplies had to be brought in by a boat. The island had no source of fresh water, and almost 1 million gallons were shipped in each week.
Wow. Building a high security prison elsewhere was more affordable for the federal government, and in 1963, Uncle Sam, Devil's Island, was no more. Today, the equivalent of the infamous federal prison on Alcatraz Island is a maximum security institute in Florence, Colorado. It's nicknamed Alcatraz of the Rockies.
Wow, there's a lot on there. There's a lot on Alcatraz. But here's a question for you: would you yourself, if you were a prisoner, knowing the waters around, the winds, the currents, the thing, would you try to escape?
Me personally, I don't think I would be able to do it.
I don't think I could. Not this day and age.
You think them three guys made some sort of raft and paddle, but it's not just that. They obviously had to burrow out of their cells and get out of their cells before they thought of anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, no, me personally, I don't think I'd be too scared to do it.
No.
So,
I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it myself either. But we're going to give you 10 facts about Alcatraz. And I'm going to do one. And Gaz is going to do one. So, number one. It was the home of exotic animals. Before it was used as a prison, Alcatraz was home to some exotic animals. Most of them are extinct today. Some animals in Alcatraz before included the American cheetah and short-faced bear.
well, okay. Fact number 2. The first installation of military. In 1854, the first installation of military was established in Alcatraz. It was to protect the bombing.
Booming.
Oh, booming.
It's
Bombing.
booming.
Booming of the West. Another fraction of Alcatraz is seen when it's used to imprison the most hardened criminals.
Fact number 3. The Alcatraz Island. The prison is located in Alcatraz Island. It has the total area of 22 acres. It has the height of 121 feet above elevation. There are no sources of fresh water on the island.
Okay, fact number 4. The animals. The animals which came to Alcatraz by swimming across the bay include the banana slugs, deer mice, and slender salamanders.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought they'd be able to do that in all the currents and that.
Cold.
That's
Yeah.
quite intriguing. Fact number 5. The eggs. When the Ohlone lived on the island, which was the indigenous people, they wiped out all eggs in Alcatraz. They will hunt for the mer's eggs because they are more costly compared to the eggs of chickens. They have flame-coloured yolks and bigger size.
Okay, fact number 6. Mexican Governor Pio Pico. Mexican Governor Pio Pico granted the ownership of the island to Julian Workman in 1846. Next, John C. Fremont purchased the island in the price of $5,000. In 1848, the US government took the possession of the island.
And fact number 7, the barren island. The island of Alcatraz was very barren. Therefore, there were 23,000 gallon wooden water tanks built in the island. The people also began to plant trees in 1854.
Okay, fact number 8, military supplies. During the Civil War, there was no single shot in Alcatraz, but this island was a home of 5,000 pounds of cannons and guns.
Wow, that's a lot.
That is a lot. 5,000 pounds.
Yeah. Fact number 9, the Indian prisoners. In 1873, there were some Indian prisoners placed here. The civilian prisoners were transported to the island because of 1906 earthquake. They had to wait until the city jails could be restored after the earthquake.
Now, last fact, fact number 10, Alcatraz, the largest steel reinforced concrete structure. The largest steel reinforced concrete structure in the world was built in Alcatraz in 1912. The construction of 3-story cell house was completed.
Wow, I did not know that about Alcatraz.
No.
But if there's anything you would like us to discuss or topics you'd like us to talk about and give facts about, put it down in the comments below. Don't forget to click that subscribe button and the little bell for when we release a new video. And we hope you enjoyed our first podcast. There will be many more to come on different things. So, as we say, peace, love,
and be lucky.
From me, Glenn, aka Bez.
And from me, Gaz.
And we hope to you come back and see us again.
Thanks for listening.